Hi everybody, this is Angel Arts, and this is vlog number 13 of the Sinlyn trial. So, as usual, if you guys haven't gotten up through session 13, I highly recommend that you do so before continuing on with this video. So, this session had us, wrapping things up with the Botan people. I felt that in character, I wanted to make sure that Quinn informed these allies that the Reignites were true to their word and wanted to maintain this contractual agreement to owe them a favor at some point. And I thought as a um, symbol of good faith, or as a gesture of good faith, she would make this sunburst, I guess, carving using her paints in order to, I guess, solidify this agreement. And that was something that was very important for me to do. I wanted to do it in the previous session, but there was a whole issue of me not having my paintbrush to be able to use my amazing paints. And I like being able to use my paints for things that are not necessarily combat oriented or not something that was required to advance the story, because I think that there is value in using them for role-playing purposes, such as establishing these relationships with these other NPC characters. I'm very much behind that as well. So, so there was that, and then we went on to look for the Night Stalkers, which are very different from the Botan. They are a bit less straightforward. It was really cool being able to meet them in the way that we did with the wolf. So apparently they have this ability to transform into other creatures, whereas the Botan are straightforward in that they are humanoid creatures, well, humanoid versions of what we consider to be animals, whereas the Night Stalkers are humans, but they can transform into animals. So I don't know if Devin did that on purpose. I'm thinking he probably did, but I'm only just now thinking about that parallelism between the two factions. The Night Stalkers are a lot less, like I said, straightforward. They're a lot more secretive. They are neither good nor evil. They just are, and they seem to be more interested in caring more about themselves and what's in it for them, which again isn't necessarily good or evil. So I thought that Devin did a very good job of showing two groups that are, they're both groups that I think are neutral in alignment, but I think one is more positive. I don't want to call the Botans positive and the Night Stalkers negative, because they're not, it's not that simple. I'm not really sure how to describe them, except they are two sides of the same neutral coin. One is a lot easier for Quinn to appeal to, and the other one was a lot easier for Blaze to appeal to. So, so there was that. One of the things I did want to talk about was the instance when Blaze knowingly, purposefully lit fire within, just before we were about to get into that big fight, and knowing full well that that was one of the major rules against the land, the rules against the undead or the spirits of the land. And this, I have to admit, and this is just my personal opinion, this is nothing against Dylan personally, and it's nothing against Andrew personally. Let me just preface it with that. It's nothing against them personally, but I was a bit irritated, if I was being honest, when both Saroon and Blaze were purposefully lighting fire. Like Saroon was trying to do it thinking that he could hide it from the spirits. Blaze did it thinking that, basically calling the spirits bluff and thinking that, whatever the spirits, were going to do as a repercussion for lighting fire, going against the rules, that he was going to survive it. And I guess the reason why I personally was irritated was because, at least for me, I believed that both Saroon and Blaze were smarter than that. Like, I'm not saying that Blaze isn't prideful. I'm not saying that Saroon isn't a secretive person who might have had a past where he was trying to, finagle, or he's a charlatan trying to like deceive things. But I guess for me as a player, I kind of felt that Saroon would have been smart enough to realize that these beings, these spirits, that he was given the understanding that there was no hiding from these spirits. And I kind of would also like to believe that even as stubborn as Blaze is, and even as prideful as Blaze is, in character, he still would have realized, especially after his fight against the mountain, the bar guy at the in the city down south, that based on all of the rumors that was being given to him, especially as someone who is very respectful of legends and the legend of that land, that he would have been smart enough to realize that if he did go against the spirit's rules, that was probably not something that he would be able to withstand. Even him would not be able to survive. So I don't know. I don't want to say that Dylan or Andrew were playing their characters incorrectly, because it's their characters. Like, at the end of the day, they know their characters better than I do. Who am I to say that something that they did was in character or not? But I don't know. For me as a player, from what I have personally observed as a third-party person, I personally thought that they would have been smarter than that. So that was kind of why I was irritated. Now, that's me talking as a player. As a GM, Devin was very shocked about. It was shocked that Andrew slash Blaze did that, because he even said so himself, that he had tried to pound into our heads numerous times, tried to warn us numerous times, if you do this, you will not be able to survive. You will die. Like, you shouldn't survive if you do these rules. And I, both as a player and as a character, both myself and Quinn, fully understood that. Fully understood that this was just something that we just had to follow, and we had to respect the rules. So it was less about Quinn. I think Blaze did it. I think Andrew's explanation was that Blaze did it because he wanted to prove that he wasn't afraid. But the thing is, I think there's a difference between being courageous and being reckless. And I think Blaze has shown that many times. That he is courageous, but he can also be very reckless. And I think that he's been put in his place enough to understand his reckless behavior, and understanding that if he's not careful, if he's not doesn't have some sort of caution, or that he could end up paying the ultimate price if he allows his recklessness to get the better of him, if he doesn't choose his battles. I think there are times when you definitely can be courageous and maybe be a little bit reckless, and there are times where I don't think it's really that smart to be reckless. And at least me as a player, I thought Blaze had learned that. So that's kind of why I was irritated when Blaze ended up doing that. And notice that I'm specifically saying Blaze, not Andrew, because I think Andrew was deep down inside trying to stay in character. Now, taking it from the point of view of the DM, going back to Devin again, Devin, I guess, said that he didn't intend for any of us to actually break the rules, because he himself thought that he made it very clear that we would just die. That we would die if we did it. And so Devin himself, when Blaze did that, he had to think about, okay, how am I supposed to get Blaze out of this in a believable way? Because I don't think Devin intended for Blaze to die at that moment, especially since we were about to get into this big fight. And trust me, if Blaze had died, there was no way that Saroon and Quinn would have been able to win that fight. Um, because yeah, there was no way that we would have won that fight without Blaze. Blaze was pretty much key. I mean, all three of us. That's one thing I loved about that combat, and I mentioned this before, so I'm not going to dwell on it too much. That we all worked so well together. That was the battle that showed us really gelling as a team and really showing us each playing our strengths and contributing equally towards defeating that monster, and to the point that we exhausted virtually every single one of our resources. I was down to my last level 1 spell, Sarun was down to his last whatever resources, and then Blaze, I'm sure, probably would not have been able to survive a couple more rounds of that, especially if one of us or both of us went down around him. So it was a very good, challenging fight. But going back to Devin, he came up. I thought that he came up with a reasonable way for him to prevent Blaze's untimely demise, such that the story could progress. And I understand that he probably did that so the story could progress, so that we wouldn't have a total party wipeout, which I don't think he would have done. I think Devin would have instead, if he had to kill Blaze on that spot, he would have not done something so that the Night Stalkers didn't just outright destroy both me and Sarun. I think even with the combat, even if the fight had killed or defeated the three of us, I think he would have not have killed us. He would have just been like, okay, well, you guys didn't prove yourselves, so we'll let you live, but we're not going to help you with your army, which I think, I'm pretty sure that's what Devin intended on doing, because he gave us a pretty darn, like I said, pretty darn challenging fight. And that if it weren't for Quinn having the insight or having the foresight to cast heroism on them, which prevented the fear effects, because I think that battle would have been completely different if we were given fear, if it was more than just Quinn having fear. Unfortunately, the one that was given fear was the one that wasn't doing the attacking, because part of fear's nasty effects is you have disadvantage to your attack rolls, which is not something that we wanted to happen to Blaze or to Sarun at all. So it just so happened that I was able to cast that spell so that they didn't get affected. Because I feel like knowing how close we were to the end of that battle, even with heroism, I think it would have ended a lot differently. But so Devin instead came up with a reasonable explanation as to why Blaze didn't just outright get killed. That being said, if it were me, which is surprising to me that I'm about to say this, because I'm the kind of GM that doesn't like killing their players. I know many GMs actually do secretly, whether they admit it or not, they secretly do want to actually kill or defeat their PCs, one of the PCs, or at least maybe not do a total wipeout, but at least kill one, maybe two of the PCs at some point during the story. And I'm not like that at all. I don't like killing my PCs, mostly because so much of my campaigns are story-driven, and it ends up, like, delaying the story. For me, at least, it delays the story if one of the characters ends up dying, because even if a PC does die, I would probably have like some sort of side quest that allowed them to resurrect them in some way, if such a way existed, such a way for them to resurrect them could be done. Of course, they would have to pay some sort of price, most likely, whether it was in-game or out-of-game in terms of time, like extra time for us to actually keep the story going. Because, like I said, so many of my campaigns are so story-driven that it kind of requires the PCs to be present so that I can actually, allow that drive, because a lot of the story is based around them, and it's kind of hard to tell many key moments of a story that revolves around the characters if they're not around, if that makes sense. So I don't like killing PCs, but I will kill PCs if it's warranted. And let me preface this by saying that I don't like killing PCs just because of sheer dumb luck, just because, somebody happens to have like a terrible day with the dice. I certainly don't like killing a PC because of one bad dice roll. Like if they were working on a machine and like some sort of machine, and the machine like malfunctioned because somebody like rolled a one, or rolled a natural one. I don't like taking somebody from, full hit points or close to full hit points to death just because they rolled one die that just happened to botch. For me, that doesn't sit well for me because, sometimes the dice gods just like to troll the players, and I would much rather killing off players for more legitimate reasons than that. Far more legitimate reasons. Other times, and this happens more often, I might put them in some sort of a combat situation that I didn't intend to be as challenging as it was. And this happens a lot when I homebrew monsters, which I do have to do quite often. Sometimes I miscalculate how powerful they actually are and realize that they're hitting these characters a lot harder than they should. You probably have seen me do that a bit in some of my other campaigns. And it's not the player's fault that I designed them in a broken way. And that's really what it boils down to, is it was my fault, and I made a broken combat situation that was just too difficult for the characters for something that isn't even really a significant fight. Like it's not like it's a major boss fight or anything, and having that be the cause of death for a character, in my opinion, would be kind of silly. So I have to take that in consideration in the middle of combat, and come up with ways to compensate for that, because again, it's not the player's fault. They shouldn't. No character should die because of a mistake that I made in designing a specific combat or monster. So in this case, with Blaze just turning on, just setting a fire, even after the GM and the NPCs have repeatedly tried to hammer into us, you will die if you don't follow these rules, or you will pay some extremely horrible consequences that you probably won't be able to recover from if you don't follow these rules. After that has happened many, many times, and I think it's been obvious both in character and out of character, if I were Devin, I would have killed Blaze on the spot, personally. That's what I would have done. Not despite Andrew, obviously, and certainly not despite Blaze, but I think that death would have been deserved. And I feel like for a character like Blaze, if he's still that stubborn, then I think that would have been a great way for him to learn his lesson. I think that, Devin could have killed off Blaze, and because Blaze was dead, we wouldn't have been able to defeat the Darkstalker spirit thing. We wouldn't have been able to recruit them for the army. Maybe would have lost the war. All because of that one choice that Blaze did, and now we might have to go on this side quest to resurrect him. And I think that would have resulted in very good storytelling. It might mean that Andrew might have had to re-roll a different character, at least temporarily, while we're trying to resurrect Blaze, and I'm sure that would have opened up a lot of really great storytelling, and more importantly, some really good character evolution. Like, if once we do resurrect Blaze, and he finds out it was kind of his fault that he died, and not only that, it was kind of his fault that we ended up not winning the war and not gaining the trust of the Night Stalkers, I think that would really be a major wake-up call to Blaze, and I think he would have learned, or at least evolved from it. But because things went the way they did, I don't think that Blaze necessarily learned that much from it. Like, maybe he might have realized at the last minute that, oh darn it, I made a huge mistake and I would have died. But I don't think the lesson would have been that impactful if he actually did die. And again, I'm not saying that it would teach Andrew a lesson, because he's done this for many years. I'm sure that he probably would have understood that happening, I don't know. I can't read his mind, but I feel that as much as many of you love Blaze's, I love Blaze's character, and I don't want him to die, and I don't obviously want to lose our ability to defend Allburn because of the army. I don't want any of that, and I don't want to necessarily sidetrack the campaign to go on this separate quest for who long how many sessions while Andrew has a different character to resurrect Blaze before we can continue on with Devon's story. I don't necessarily want any of that, but at the same time, I really did feel like Blaze should have died at that point. I really feel like he should have. I wouldn't have, if I was in Devon's shoes, I wouldn't want to kill off Blaze by any stretch of the imaginations, but I felt like he needed to. He should have. And of course, you have to be careful with the opposite direction, and that is, sometimes characters do really stupid things, or they do things because it's in character. Like maybe it's in character for somebody to be so prideful or so stubborn that they do something that might ultimately lead to their demise. And so I think that the big challenge is that the GM and the players have to work together to try to prevent that from being a continual problem. I think that the GM and the players have to work together to try to come up with a way that the character can learn and evolve in such a way that they don't continually put themselves in danger all the time, so that in character they do have an easier time self-preserving themselves, I guess is the big thing. So again, yes, I think that Andrew was trying to play in character as Blaze, which is fine, but I think that there needs to be opportunities to teach Blaze to not always put himself in that position. I had thought that he had had enough experience that caused him to evolve, at least to the point that he wouldn't have done what he did. But I guess I was wrong. I guess it didn't stick yet. He didn't completely learn yet. And maybe the only thing that really would make it stick would be his death. I don't know. Again, this is just my personal thoughts, my personal opinions, walking away from that campaign, because it's something that I wasn't even planning on really mentioning that part in this vlog. I wasn't even really planning on bringing it up. It's what I honestly was thinking about leaving that session, because it did kind of bother me a little bit. And again, I was sort of bothered by it when Saroon did it the session before. So Saroon's not completely off the hook either, but definitely with what happened with Blaze, leaving that session, that was just something that I just couldn't. I figured if I'm writing these vlogs, the purpose of these vlogs is for me to share my honest feelings throughout this campaign, for better or for worse, even if it's something that I feel like other people might get upset about with my feelings or my opinions. And again, if Andrew or Dylan or Devin, if you're watching these, I'm not trying to, again, I'm not saying these things to upset you or to make you think that any of you did anything wrong. Because this is all just my opinion. This is all just how I feel about, the things that went on around the table, and these are just my own personal thoughts to at least share what's going through my head, and you can either completely ignore what I said or, just take it for what it is, which is just, my own personal musings. And I'm gonna go to the next session, obviously, and be completely fine, because now that I've just completely shared, my personal thoughts of the previous session, I can move on and we're all good. So yeah, so I don't know, what I guess my question is, what do you guys think, especially for those of you who are GMs, because the topic of killing PCs, there's so much debate about it. I mean, as a rule of thumb, I think that killing the PCs need to know that there has to be a threat. If the PCs know that the GM doesn't want to kill them or won't kill them, if the PCs don't believe that they actually are in danger, it really takes away from the experience. So I'm not when I shared that I don't like killing my PCs, that doesn't mean that I won't, because just because I don't want to, I also understand that the danger, the risk of a PC death has to still be there. Otherwise, what's the point? Otherwise, the whole narrative is just destroyed because you know that your character is always safe. So that wasn't what I was trying to say. And if Devin did kill off Blaze, then we would definitely see, no, we're not safe at all. And I think Devin has showed that before, during the instance when we ended up, when Blaze ended up getting on that fight with the pirates down south. So those are just my thoughts. And I'm looking forward to today's session, today's session, which is session 14. Thank you very much for watching and at least listening to what I have to say. You, of course, can have your own personal conclusions based on my thoughts. And so I guess I will talk to you later. Until next time, love yourselves and love each other.